the cold steel of a heavy vault door, catching the dim fluorescent light that never quite banishes the shadows, stands as the ultimate physical manifestation of state-level silence. It is behind such barriers, locked away from the public gaze and the immediate scrutiny of elected bodies, that the most profound and ethically challenging government programs were conceived and executed. For generations, the official record maintained a posture of vehement denial concerning these shadow operations. They existed in whispers, speculation, and the periphery of grainy photographs, until the sheer weight of historical evidence, catalyzed by the passage of time and dedicated investigative pressure, finally forced open those vaults. The following investigation peels back the layers of 5 such projects, vast, resource-intensive endeavors, born from the pressurized climate of global tension, leaving indelible marks on history, the environment, and the human psyche. The first major acknowledgement to emerge from the archives concerns a massive, sustained high-altitude reconnaissance effort conducted during the tense, unforgiving zenith of the Cold War. A period defined by the precarious balance of mutually assured destruction. This was an operation predicated on visual certainty, the desperate need to pierce the opacity of rival territories and understand the disposition of their military architecture. The instruments of this certainty were silent, silver-winged aircraft capable of achieving flight profiles previously deemed impossible. Picture these machines, sleek and impossibly fragile-looking against the deep, unforgiving stratospheric blue, routinely slicing through the air 13 miles above the Earth's surface. At such altitudes, the sky ceases to be blue. It transitions into the star-dusted velvet blackness of space, and the curvature of the planet becomes a visible, humbling arc below the wingtip. These flights were exercises in extreme engineering and human endurance. The air crews, encased in specialized pressure suits, breathed pure oxygen, enduring temperatures that plummeted to 80 degrees below freezing outside the pressurized cabin. Inside the cockpit, surrounded by the dizzying array of dials and gauges, the pilots operated in a state of suspended isolation, where the only sound was the steady, thin whine of the turbojet engines and the rustle of the mission map. Their primary payload was not ordnance, but the most advanced photographic equipment available, massive optical systems, capable of resolving minute details on the ground from impossible heights. These cameras utilized rolls of film measured not in feet, but in miles, tightly wound onto spools of metal that felt surprisingly heavy and cold to the touch. The scent of hydraulic fluid, ozone, and stale air was constant, the physical atmosphere of high-altitude espionage. The denial phase of this program was absolute. If one of these sophisticated reconnaissance platforms was lost, a not uncommon tragedy given the operational envelope and hostile countermeasures, the official explanation was invariably meteorological research or a civilian loss involving experimental equipment. The remains, salvaged or analyzed from afar, were painstakingly sanitized or classified beyond reach. This operational deceit was essential, as confirming the program's existence would have been an automatic casus belli, revealing vulnerabilities and capabilities that the adversary could not be allowed to calculate. Far below the glittering silence of the high atmosphere, the nerve center of this operation was located in sprawling, functional complexes, often indistinguishable from mundane military installations. These were the windowless bunkers described in newly declassified records, vast, labyrinthine concrete structures where the sun was a forgotten concept. The typical environment was one of constant, controlled temperature and humidity, crucial for the preservation and handling of the invaluable photographic film. Technicians, working in shifts that blurred the concepts of day and night, labored under the harsh, consistent hum of specialized air filtration systems. The dark rooms were the true cathedrals of this effort.
They were immense, red-lit spaces, smelling sharply of fixer and developer chemicals, where the continuous ribbons of exposed film were processed.
Watching a single flight's output emerge, miles upon miles of stunningly detailed monochrome imagery, was to witness history unfold in sharp focus. Specialists, their eyes trained to spot the tiniest anomaly, spent hours hunched over light tables, moving magnifying glasses across the glossy surface, cataloging every silo, every troop movement, every freshly poured concrete pad. Decades passed with these dedicated personnel working in profound anonymity, cataloging every crucial shadow. Their knowledge locked solely within the secure walls of the facility. The final official acknowledgement of this massive program transformed a collection of persistent rumors into accepted, documented historical fact, detailing the true scope of Cold War surveillance and the immense national resources poured into establishing visual dominion over the globe. A second startling revelation, perhaps more chilling in its environmental implications, concerns the clandestine pursuit of atmospheric control. A desperate, often foolhardy effort to weaponize the very clouds. Born from the scientific optimism and military paranoia of the mid-20th century, this program was an attempt to fundamentally alter weather patterns for tactical advantage, or potentially strategic deterrence. The conceptual goal was godlike in its ambition, to summon rain, dissipate fog, or induce devastating storms upon command. The core of the technology centered around cloud seeding using specialized aerosols. We examine historical documents detailing operations conducted in remote testing grounds, vast stretches of arid, windswept land chosen precisely for their isolation. The land was chosen for predictable, severe weather patterns. These locations, often situated miles from any major habitation, became stages for bizarre and complex experiments. The landscape itself bore the initial weight of the secrecy. The testing sites were characterized by temporary-looking metal shacks, surrounded by chain-link fences topped with razor wire. Their only constant companions, the baking sun and the endless, dry silence. The deployment mechanism was elaborate. Specialized equipment, often mounted on customized aircraft or housed in large, insulated trucks, was used to generate and release massive quantities. This matter consisted of iodides, dry ice, or exotic chemical compounds into the atmosphere. The scent of these testing sites, according to limited internal documents, sometimes held a faint, metallic or sulfurous tang. This occurred immediately following an aerial deployment run. The visual effect, observed only by a handful of masked and shielded researchers, could be fleeting. This included a sudden, unnatural haze spreading across the blue canvas, or an ephemeral, shimmering quality to the air that vanished as quickly as it appeared. Internal memos reveal the meticulous, almost obsessive documentation of atmospheric conditions. Scientists tracked barometric pressure, wind shear, and cloud formation with dedicated monitoring towers that looked like skeletal sentinels rising from the desert floor. The data collected filled hundreds of thousands of handwritten logs and early punch cards. These records speak to the seriousness with which these weaponization efforts were undertaken. Yet, the success was erratic, and the potential side effects remained largely unstudied. They were swept aside in the push for immediate operational capability. The chilling legacy of this environmental manipulation lingers in two forms: the vast quantities of heavy metals and chemicals dispersed over sparsely populated regions. The second form is the delayed public accountability regarding the ethical parameters of such research. Had these programs successfully induced a drought or a catastrophic flood in a hostile territory, the resulting global fallout would have been unimaginable. The belated admission confirms that the state actively pursued the capacity to manipulate global thermodynamics. They treated the Earth's delicate weather systems as simply another domain for conflict. The final declassified files on atmospheric control carry the weight of environmental uncertainty. This forces a retrospective consideration of the hidden ecological costs paid for Cold War scientific hubris. Deep within the Earth, far removed from the sight and sound of daily life, Program 3 involved the construction of elaborate subterranean facilities. These were not mere bunkers. They were colossal architectural undertakings, massive, fully self-contained cities. They were designed to preserve critical governmental and industrial infrastructure against threats deemed unimaginable, namely thermonuclear conflict. The driving force behind this monumental effort was absolute existential paranoia, gripping the inner circle of the national security state. If the surface world was rendered uninhabitable, the continuity of governance and technological capability had to be assured beneath the bedrock. The sensory experience of these facilities begins with the sheer weight of the rock above. Entering them required navigating colossal blast doors, hinged slabs of reinforced steel, often 10 to 15 feet thick. They were designed to withstand multi-megaton forces. The sound of these doors closing, a deep, resonant, and final thud, was the sound of separation from the rest of humanity. Once inside, the scale is overwhelming. These spaces are defined by concrete, cold, rough, unyielding concrete that stretches in every direction. The construction was a feat of civil engineering, carving out miles of arteries and vast cavernous chambers beneath placid mountain ranges or remote valleys. The air inside these artificial worlds is perpetually cool, tasting faintly of limestone dust, ozone from electrical equipment, and stale, filtered air. The architecture was entirely functional and severe. Miles of corridors were illuminated by continuous rows of fluorescent tubes, casting a sickly, unchanging amber or pale green light. This light eliminated shadows, but offered no warmth. This lighting, combined with the constant, low-frequency thrum of massive air handlers and pumps, the artificial breath of the sealed environment. This created an atmosphere of persistent, low-grade stress. Program 3 included the installation of complex systems designed for long-term survival. Gigantic reservoirs of purified water, redundant power generators fueled by massive underground diesel or nuclear caches, and specialized decontamination chambers were standard. These were facilities built to last centuries, insulated against seismic activity and radioactive fallout. Specialized workshops were established, filled with tools coated in cosmoline, ready to maintain equipment that might sit dormant for decades before activation. The files now admit to the existence of multiple such sites, strategically scattered across the country, each capable of hosting thousands of essential personnel. The detailed blueprints, previously guarded by layers of highest classification, reveal not just sleeping quarters and command centers. They also reveal fully equipped hospitals, broadcast studios, and even rudimentary recreation areas. This reflected the planners' belief that survivors would need more than just shelter to maintain societal function. The silence in these deep earth chambers today, when they are not actively utilized, is absolute and profound. It is broken only by the mechanical whisper of the ventilation. This colossal investment in subterranean survival speaks volumes about the level of fear. It shows their willingness to commit boundless resources to highly speculative, worst-case scenarios, always hidden from the public who ultimately funded their construction. Program 4 delves into one of the darkest chapters of government secrecy: questionable human experimentation. These projects, often cloaked in the benign institutional guise of medical advancement or behavioral research. They constituted severe ethical transgressions conducted in isolated, controlled environments. The focus, as historical documents reveal, centered on methods of behavioral modification, control, and interrogation resistance. The goal was to unlock and ultimately dominate the mechanisms of the human mind under extreme stress. The settings for these trials were usually sequestered spaces within existing governmental or military hospital wings. They were chosen precisely for the anonymity and controlled access they offered. Picture the scene: institutional buildings characterized by pale green or beige paint, peeling slightly in damp corners. The hallways are long, smelling overwhelmingly of antiseptic and industrial cleaning chemicals. They are punctuated by the rhythmic, squeaking sound of rubber soles on highly polished linoleum floors.
These isolated wings often housed subjects, volunteers, or those unknowingly subjected to testing, who were already marginalized or institutionalized.
This minimized the likelihood of public inquiry or external advocates. The historical documents related to Program 4 are now yellowed and fragile, smelling faintly of paper decay and institutional age. They meticulously detail protocols involving psychotropic agents, sensory deprivation, prolonged isolation, and various forms of induced psychological stress. These records, written in the clipped, clinical language of scientific reporting, often fail to mask the inherent inhumanity of the procedures. The data collected was voluminous, detailing physiological responses, heart rate fluctuations, sweat gland activity, and observed shifts in cognitive function. All this was aimed at identifying breaking points and exploitable weaknesses in the human will. The environment of these testing rooms was clinically sterile, but psychologically corrosive. Subjects often resided in sparsely furnished, monitored rooms, sometimes for weeks or months. The only constant was the presence of recording devices, hidden behind one-way mirrors or disguised within innocuous ventilation grates. The feeling of being relentlessly observed, even in moments of solitude, was a central feature of the behavioral modification regime. The clothes provided were typically thin, scratchy institutional gowns, adding another layer of sensory deprivation and dehumanization.
The ethical breach in Program 4 lies in the systemic lack of informed consent.
It also includes the devastating long-term psychological damage inflicted upon the participants. When these programs were officially exposed and acknowledged, often following protracted legal battles and journalistic investigation, the revelations shook the foundational trust in government institutions. The reports confirmed that military and intelligence agencies pursued mind control with a terrifying focus. They leveraged the veneer of medical research to conduct trials that deliberately violated fundamental human rights. The acknowledgement serves as a profound historical warning about the dangers of unchecked scientific exploration. This was conducted under the absolute cloak of national security necessity. Finally, the narrative culminates with the official acknowledgement of Project X. This was the infamous multi-decade investigation into unexplained aerial phenomena, UAP, commonly known in earlier decades as unidentified flying objects, UFOs. For half a century, the government position on these observations was monolithic: ridicule, denial, and systematic attempts to attribute every sighting to misidentification. They also attributed sightings to meteorological balloons or psychological projection.
Project X existed in the shadows, maintained by small, often underfunded teams of dedicated analysts operating in highly compartmentalized secrecy.
The personnel involved in Project X spent years immersed in the bizarre and the mundane. Their work involved sifting through thousands of reports, ranging from sensationalized public claims. This included highly credible accounts provided by trained military aviators and radar operators. The sensory experience of their work was characterized by a specific dichotomy: the polished, technical environment of their secure offices. This contrasted sharply with the grainy, indistinct, and often frustrating visual evidence they examined. They dealt constantly with the texture of old media, low-resolution photographs, brittle paper testimonies smelling of basements and attics, and most crucially, the grainy, unstable footage captured by early infrared sensors or cockpit cameras. The central challenge was the lack of reliable, verifiable physical evidence. This necessitated endless cycles of cross-referencing meteorological data, radar logs, and flight plans to eliminate prosaic explanations. The sustained denial surrounding Project X was rooted in geopolitical sensitivity. Admitting that high-performance military assets were being tracked, often with impunity, by objects exhibiting capabilities far beyond known human technology, or even theoretical understanding, was considered a profound national security vulnerability. To maintain technological supremacy, the only viable response was to dismiss the phenomena publicly while continuing intense classified study privately. When the dam of official denial finally broke, it was a slow, deliberate process, driven by internal pressure and the unavoidable accumulation of high-quality, scientifically robust data. The transition was marked by the declassification of specific reports, including radar tracks, electro-optical recordings, and authenticated testimonies from reliable military sources. The previously blurry images, once fodder for late-night talk shows, now stand validated in newly published governmental assessments and reports. The scent of these newly declassified files is distinct, crisp, official paper, bearing the heavy stamp of the state seal, replacing the dusty scent of rumor. The official confirmation fundamentally altered the historical record, acknowledging that the government had indeed been systematically studying these phenomena for decades, pouring resources into understanding objects that defy current physics, all while maintaining a rigid public facade of skepticism. The acknowledgement of Project X closes the file on a specific form of institutional deception, transforming decades of denial into accepted, documented historical fact. It confirms the hidden costs of absolute secrecy, not just the financial drain and the erosion of public trust, but the profound human toll exacted on the researchers who toiled in the shadows and the citizens whose genuine observations were systematically discredited. These 5 programs finally brought into the cold light of historical verification. Collectively, demonstrate the immense, often ethically compromised, lengths to which states will go when driven by the intertwined motives of technological supremacy and existential fear. The residual chill of the vault door remains, reminding us that for history to truly be understood, the shadows must first be illuminated. The tactile reality of these forgotten operations, the taste of chemicals in the air, the feel of cold concrete deep underground, the endless drone of ventilation fans are the true sensory hallmarks of the national security state's hidden past.